Talking about following people's advice, last night was the test of the federal government. They had the by-election in Dunkley, and look, we can always get the spin that Labor would put on that result, that by-election result in Dunkley. We can also get Liberals' spin. The two big parties have put their spin across. We thought we might go for a bit of an umpire, someone in the middle, a leader of One Nation, Pauline Hanson, great straight shooter. Let's get a real, don't you think, Andrew? Let's get it from.
I love Pauline Hanson.
Yeah, and this is a person that's going to give us it straight.
An honest opinion.
An honest opinion. How did this go, and who did it work for, and what happened there? Joining us here on the catch up from Brisbane is Pauline Hanson. Good afternoon, Pauline.
Good afternoon, Rusty. Hi.
Hi. Look, thank you for joining us. We just want to hear it straight. The by-election was held last night for Dunkley. How did it shape up in real terms for both Liberal and Labor?
Well, I think both of them, they went 3.74 percentage points up and Liberals went, and Labor went down with it. Who lost out of this? We didn't contest this, and so therefore we didn't get in the mix of it. Now, the last election between the UAP and One Nation, they pulled 8% of the vote. Now, the Libs couldn't rely on that for the preferences. So a lot of our voters would actually come from not only the coalition, but also from Labor as well. So it's going to be a mixed bag coming to the next election because we are going to stand in all seats. So this has been a plus for the Libs, right? So for a government to actually lose it, especially in a seat where the sitting member died, normally they don't. So this has been a loss for the Labor Party. Overall, my opinion. And I think it plays out the next time around because Dunkley is a very strong Labor state. And there's been no presence by the Libs in that state for pushback. So all the media is basically focused on Labor. So this has shown to me that the Libs have gained ground, but outside of that state, and if you look at the other states, if anyone around the country is on the 6% in Labor, they've got possibly they could lose their seats in the next election. But it may not be enough for the Liberals to get control of the House.
Okay, well that's a very, very straight and honest opinion, and that's why we wanted you to join us here this afternoon to hear it without the spin, and that's exactly what you give us. Now, there's a lot happening in your party. There's a lot happening in Queensland. Firstly, let's touch on your party. You've had a couple of new recruits that have come across from the Clive Palmer United Party. What's happened there?
Well, Craig Kelly, because Clyde Palmer is no longer registered federally, he has the one member in the Senate, Senator Babette, who does a fantastic job. He's really good. Anyway, he's the lone senator in the Parliament for Clyde Palmer. So he's deregistered party, although it doesn't affect Babette having his seat under the United Australia Party. But Clyde Palmer couldn't have stood candidates in the election because he wasn't registered anyway. So Craig Kelly approached me that he wanted to come across to One Nation, and which I welcomed him openly, and he's going to be a great asset to the party in helping with the federal campaign. Now at this stage, nothing's been said in concrete of whether Craig will stand for a seat or not. He did mention it with Chris Kenny last week on Sky that he's looking at Chris Bowen's seat. So that'll be an interesting contest there if he does stand against Chris Bowen.
Okay, and Clive Palmer himself has given up the ghost on politics, is that right?
No, I wouldn't say that. It's hard to say where Clive's going to go. I don't know what his movements are going to be. Whether he will register again to stand candidates in the next election, I don't know what he intends to do. But I'm so proud and pleased to have Craig Kelly across. He's an experienced politician. He spoke openly about the COVID during that time, which we've both been vindicated for our stance on this and what happened with it. And the other one is Ben Dawkins from WA, who's come across the One Nation. He was voted in under Labor. They didn't think he'd win the seat, but because of circumstances he did. Ben was ostracised by the Labor Party. Then he went independent, so then he's actually he's actually come across the One Nation. And I've looked at his speeches on the floor of Parliament, very much One Nation, very much aligned with calling out about the COVID. He's very much for firearms, which is our policy for law-abiding citizens to have their firearms, and farmers and everyone. And, and he's very concerned about the cost of living and housing.
Yeah, and Pauline, your One Nation party has always been very mindful about immigration levels. I can't believe that during a period where we have a cost of living crisis and we have a housing shortage like never before, that we're bringing in 700,000 new entries into Australia.
Well, it was about 1 million last year.
About 1 million?
See, people are forgetting the number of migrants that we're bringing in, but also the foreign students. So in Australia, there's over about 725,000 foreign students in Australia. So they are impacting on the rental accommodation as well as the new migrants. So the government used bringing in new migrants to prop up the gross domestic product, because productivity in Australia has slid. So they bring in new migrants to bring money and productivity to Australia. And governments have always done it, but it is bad timing to bring in that many into the country, considering we don't have enough houses. Now, it's estimated there's 650,000 shortage of houses in Australia. Most of the country, they're on about 1% or less rental accommodation available. So we're in dire straits, and this is what people have to understand. Labor has also, and this is what I said, in 1992, the former president of the Labor Party and former minister, Barry Jones, said it at the Economic and Population Forum that Labor brings in people from these different countries purely for the vote. So they know it will cause social incohesion, but they don't care. And I think that's possibly happening now, and especially bringing these people in from the Gaza Strip 2000, which will not be in keeping with our cultural and our beliefs and laws and understanding. I think we'll have problems.
Is this something you're going to ramp up with before the next federal election?
Look, I talk about it constantly all the time on the floor of Parliament, and I think it needs to be exposed for what it is. The Australian public are fed up with it, that they've never really had a debate on population. And I'm not against migration, but you have to do it in a well-managed way that the right people will assimilate into Australia. No Australian wants to see these protest rallies that are happening on the streets. No one wants to see any person of any cultural background or religious belief being persecuted on our streets or in our schools or in our universities. I think it's disgusting what is happening. And unless we rein it in, and I blame the government for not actually taking action against them and stopping this going on, the police stand by and see it happen, and it's not right.
And Pauline, I don't think anybody wants to see families living in cars because they can't find accommodation.
No one does. And my heart bleeds for this people. When I, walk the streets, even in Canberra, even the nation's capital, and I saw it I just got back from WA, Western Australia yesterday, and I saw the homelessness that's in the streets in your cities there. It's happening all around the country, and it's a crying shame that we send so much money overseas. And another thing too is the money that we pour into some of these industries, there's no accountability. And I'm sick of hearing Albanese saying that it's all about accountability and, the integrity and all the rest of it, and it doesn't happen. So I hope that people think clearly at the next election, which your state election is very important, that's coming up, whether they'll hold the federal before it, because we've got the Queensland state election in October. If Albanese, and I believe the Labor Party will lose in Queensland, it'll go to the LNP. So whether he sees the writing on the wall and calls the federal election before the WA election.
And we're chatting with Pauline Hanson from One Nation. And just before I let you go, Pauline, I really do appreciate you sharing your time with us here on a Sunday. In regard to the court announcement or the finding during the week in regard to the mandating of COVID-19 vaccines, you were vindicated, very, very much so, as being one of the frontline politicians in this country against mandates. What do you think this finding means to Queensland? But what do you think it also means to the rest of Australia?
Right. I was excited and happy and thrilled for the people that have been vindicated with this. Now, in Queensland, we have a human rights legislation. So basically, there was two cases. It was the ambulance service workers that actually took the case on, and also the police. Now, under the ambulance workers, the Director General did not have the power to make health mandates under employment and the law and contract law, whereas with the police, it was about a human rights ramification because they were not given full and free informed consent to have this. And that's why I advocated all along. You see, under the Constitution, Section 5123A of the Australian Constitution, that's why the Prime Minister could not introduce mandates. He allowed the states to do it under the states to take the responsibility for it. So what this means, and I'm of the belief that Western Australia has some cases going, but you don't have the legislation on human rights. There's international human rights, but not in your state. So there's only Queensland, Victoria and the ACT that has human rights legislation for that particular state. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. But as I've always advocated, Rusty, there has to be a Royal Commission into this. No bureaucrat or premier or anyone has the right to force people to have an injection against their will purely to keep their jobs and pay the bills and put food on the table for their children. I think it's disgusting. And I called it out right from the very beginning, even with the help my vote from the government, in hoping they would address this whole issue. So I feel sorry for the people out there. Hopefully there'll be a full investigation into it, and it'll come out about the people that have had adverse side effects from having this jab that was not tried, tested and proven like we do for all other vaccinations in this country.
I think it's going to have major impacts right across the country. I really do. It's a amazing finding all the way through. You were saying that these mandates shouldn't have been brought in. The courts now are agreeing with you and others that were very stoic in your response to that call for mandates. As I said, you've been vindicated. It was lovely to have you catch up again with us on a Sunday here in Perth. And we thank you for your time, Pauline.
Look, I really appreciate you reaching out to have me on your program. So it's been great. So I hope you've learned a bit about the politics straight from the horse's mouth. I don't beat around the bush and I call it out the way I see it. And
just on the text line there, it pains me greatly to say, this is in on the text, but other than the vaccine stuff, I agree with everything that Pauline Hanson is saying. So there you go. Someone is agreeing with you right across the board.
Panel Andy here, Pauline. I just want to say you're a beacon of truth, a national treasure, and keep fighting the good fight. We love what you do. Thank you.
There you go. That's from Andrew on the panel.
Thank you.
I hope you have a great day.
Thank
Good
you.
on you. And you've made our day. Thank you, Pauline, for joining us.